I'm gonna take you to Detroit Rock City, avoiding all toll roads. Woo! Calculating. 500 yards to the motorway. Are you ready to turn right? Just lost you! Walking! Wow!
Podcast Rock City.
What's up, everybody? Joe here from Podcast Rock City. I want to thank you guys for listening to the last show. It was awesome with Lace Frehley from the rock band, cover band, Criss.
Sounds great.
Yeah, she was a lot of fun. That's Ken Mills.
Hey,
What?
I said, hey, I know that guy.
Okay, yeah. Hey, listen, I'm glad you're on the show. I had a topic and I wanted to talk about it, and I thought that you would be the best person because you really, really think these things out. And although I just kind of sprung it on you, I really think that you're going to have some good ideas.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So what I wanted to ask you, what I wanted to talk about today was the original lineup, KISS, 1974 to let's just say 79, and who was the most valuable player? Like if it was a baseball team, you would say this person was ideal for them winning the World Series, and let's say their fame is the World Series, and who did it hinge on the most? Let's start with Gene.
Okay, well, I'd also like the listener to know that you and I really don't have an answer to this as of yet.
No.
We're coming into this blind.
Right.
And we kind of just want to wrestle this out, discuss it out, and see if there's an actual answer. So you want to start with Gene, the Demon Simmons.
Correct.
Hayam wits. Well, I think that there would be no KISS without his initial concept. So that makes that incredibly important. You also have to look that back in 1974, who got the first KISS single? Wasn't it Nothing to Lose?
Right.
Gene, lead vocals.
Right.
Gene also was the first one to promote. Gene was also the person who, when Bill O'Coin said, we're bringing in somebody to teach you guys how to breathe fire, who wants to do it? Gene said, I'll do it. So Gene seemed to be overreaching in his desire to make it work, but that's not fair to say that Pete, Ace, or Paul weren't the same way.
Right.
But
yes.
I really think that the concept of KISS, the comic book, the monsters, all of that comes from everything we know about Gene's entertainment DNA, if you will.
Right. So when it comes to could somebody else have been in the band and come up with this, our answer is going to be no.
Right.
Okay. So the idea of KISS came out of the brain of Gene Simmons, and that's hugely important.
Now, keep in mind, I believe that Paul Stanley also had to buy in. All of them had to buy into this concept, but I think that Paul also had the same kind of idea that let's do something with makeup. It was in the air. There was the New York Dolls, there was David Bowie, there was Alice Cooper, but it was Gene that I feel the idea came to mix all of this. And again, I don't think it was just one person, but I look at his entertainment DNA, where he stems from. And to me, I see KISS come out of that because I can see Paul looking at the English-based bands and saying, okay, we could do something like this.
Right.
And Pete, he even thought, well, we should do something with makeup like Alice Cooper and so on and so forth. But I think that when it really came down to it, if you look at KISS, you see the Fantastic Four, you see Dr. Doom, you see all these things, and to me, that always goes back to Gene.
Okay, so that's Gene. He is very important to the whole pie as far as, or the team as things go.
Right.
Now, what about Peter? Now, for me, Peter, early on, I'm going, Peter, his contributions, his major contribution, which was Beth, came later, but was hugely important.
Absolutely. And I think that, we've discussed many times as Kiss fans how Destroyer may have tanked had it not been for Beth reviving it, giving it a second wind in a sense.
Right. The old story about them taking the 45 and flipping it over and playing Beth because they thought it was a throwaway. It was on the B-side, and it wound up being an enormous hit.
But to me, if you're going to say that came through Peter Criss, notice I didn't say come from Peter Criss.
Right.
As much as he had a part in it, writing it, that's debatable because Stan Penrich, the other fellow who wrote it, said that Pete basically had nothing to do with it. But that song never would have become a hit had Pete not said to Bob Ezrin and Gene and Paul, hey guys, I have this song. So it really doesn't matter if he wrote 2 lines in it or 20 lines in it. The song doesn't happen without Peter Criss. But in that same respect, that song doesn't become a hit without Mr. Bob Ezrin. He's not even a member of the band.
Right. Right.
So if you're going to say that, yeah, Pete was the VIP, from 74 to 78, in one sense, yes, the biggest hit came through him. But that's not to invalidate anything that he did. But that wasn't what the whole Kiss concept was all about.
Okay, and now also, as far as the live show goes, Peter's, drum solos and the rising, that none of that came from him. I mean, the drum solos did, but the gimmick, his face paint came from him. But as far as like the stuff that went along with the show, that did not come from him. That came from somebody walking up and going, we should, put him on a drum riser. I want to say that it was Neil Bogart that suggested that.
I believe it was Neil Bogart who came up with the idea of the forklift.
Right.
Sean Delaney was invaluable as well. So,
right.
When you say who's the most important VIP in Kiss, you have to restrict it to the band members because otherwise you'd have to say the Aucoin management, the whole team.
Right. That's why I did that.
Exactly.
Because the other thing would be, Bill Aucoin by himself is a VIP. Sticking with the band and saying, who really was the, like, when I watched this, I recently rewatched The Inner Sanctum. Do you remember that show?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And in it, the guy even says that Gene's, character is what has captivated people all over the world, and the blood vomiting, fire breathing demon, the way he said it. And and that's when I started thinking about it. I was like, man, they really pointed Gene out. Like they said, Ace is awesome, Eric is cool, Paul is cool, but Gene, so
well, yeah. I think in many ways Gene was the contact drug, or the the thing to draw a person in that sense. Gene, I mean, there's you watch him walking across the field in Cadillac, Michigan, and you watch him. There's just pictures of him walking through the park, and Gene back in the day could be scary. To me, the scariest Gene was when he was smiling, because he had this deranged look. He did not look of this world. The other guys looked like, oh, there's some guys in makeup, but Gene was very bizarre at the time.
Right.
He was really the focal concentration point of the public, and people would say, well, it's the face of Kiss. No, it's the tongue of Kiss. I mean, it's gotta suck to be Pete, Ace, Paul, Bruce Kulick, anybody that's been in this band, because really when it comes down to it, it's that damn tongue.
It's the tongue. Right, it is. It really is. It's like he wiggles his tongue.
And, and people will say, he's the man with the tongue. Well, they've all got tongues, people, the varying sizes.
Right, yes, sure.
of Kiss has had a tongue that I'm aware of. So, and to me, the guys in the Beatles had the tongue, and the guys, Pearl Jam, they have tongues too. But there's just something about that image and the whole thing. It just looks shocking. But one of my favorite Gene pictures, I'm sure you remember backstage at Cobo Hall. He's in a wheelchair.
I have seen it.
His hands like in his lap, and they're arched, and he's bent over and drawing within himself, and he's got this weird grin on his face.
Yes.
He looks like he could be a serial killer or something in that picture. So
it's true.
And to me, people say, like, has Gene lost the demon character? And I think that, yeah, he has, because now the demon character to him is the I love you sign, tongue in out of his mouth, and rocking back and forth. But the Gene from, like, 1975, 74, he would come at you sideways. He'd come at you grinning. And it would be like, holy crap.
Yeah, if you watched him on stage now, it's even before he was kind of stalking.
Yeah.
When he was on stage, and now it's more of a, I'm walking over here and doing my...
On the other hand, he's what, 62? 60?
Sure.
So, you got to give him a pass. Now, let's take it back to Peter Criss. Whereas Gene may have scared the hell out of some people, Paul might have scared the hell out of some people, Ace, whatever reaction people got from him. I think Peter Criss, if you read the PR and you heard Beth, it was a calming thing. It was something that little kids could identify with, and be it little girls or little boys, they could identify with the cat character.
Sure. So whereas G-Man would draw the teenagers in, Peter was bringing in the little kids.
Possibly, or the female audience, or just anybody that John Denver was huge at that time. So there were people that like Muppets, and John Denver probably saw the Pete side of thing and went like, "Hey, look at that! I can identify with that guy." And that was one of the beauties of Kiss. The concept of Kiss is that we don't care if you like the space guy or the lover guy or the bat guy or whatever, the kitty cat guy. Your money's green and we'll take it all. So.
Right. And when I think it's true, and when I think about it, I think when the solo albums came out, I know my mom bought me Peter Criss first, and I'm wondering if she bought it for him because it seemed the safest.
Well, when you think about it, Gene's got this
blood dripping out of his mouth.
And then let's take a look at the Paul Stanley thing. Paul's look was incredibly, effeminate and androgynous.
Right.
So that to some teenagers was kind of scary and a turn on at the same time. The thing about Kiss's sexuality, whether it was the demon or the kitten or the space guy or, the lover, is that it could be whatever you wanted it to be. And you got to remember at the time, again, looking at what was going on, Alice Cooper, David Bowie, Mott the Hoople and T-Rex. And you can kind of see Kiss in all of that. But Kiss just kind of put it all together in one thing. So as much as Paul's wearing a garter on one leg and pouting and primping his hair, I remember, he kind of scares me like this other guy kind of scares me. Ace was kind of like, I'd kind of use a Spinal Tap joke, like they're the two visionaries of the band and I'm in the middle. I'm like lukewarm water. In a way, you had Gene, who was this, demonic weird thing, and maybe you came from the Bible Belt, maybe you came from a religious family. As exciting as Gene was, you might have went like, I don't know if I want mom and dad to see him. And then right. Paul, he could be whatever you wanted him to be. Read the letters in Alive, folks. They're quote unquote characters are talking to you. And but Ace just seemed like, hey, I like science fiction and I'm really spacey, and he'd make these really cool faces and look like he was going to pass out or whatever. So I, for whatever reason, I was drawn to Ace. So, you can't kick Paul and Ace out of this equation, because you've got Paul in a lot of ways, as much as Gene sang on all of those songs and sang on the first single and had the big hit with I Want to Rock Her All Night, Paul was the ringleader, and I think a lot of people call him the voice of Kiss.
Sure.
For good or for bad or for right or for wrong. But yeah, and then where would Kiss be without that guitar sound of Ace's?
Ace Frehley, right. Now let's go to Paul. Okay, now before Rock and Roll All Night, the song came out, before that live version, right?
Yeah.
Kiss was doing okay as far as bands go, but not as well as they had expected.
Uh-huh.
Is that your dryer?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so they were doing. I thought it was my computer. I was about to freak out. Okay,
Do you want to say that again? And
no, that's okay. This is fun.
okay, all right.
Okay, so the song hasn't come out. Kiss is selling a few albums. Rock and Roll All Night comes out on an album, and it still doesn't blow up, but the live version does. And I Want to Rock and Roll All Night and Party Every Day has become the phrase of many generations of how they want to live their lives. Paul wrote that line. So how important was it that when Bill Aucoin, or actually it was Neil Bogart, said you need a song that your fans can rally around that tells you what you guys are about, how important is that song Rock and Roll All Night? I mean, now they both wrote it, Gene and Paul, but Paul wrote I Want to Rock and Roll All Night and Party Every Day.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. Well, I think that in the same sense that we were talking about the face of Kiss, or the tongue of Kiss, if you will. Paul Stanley was the swagger of Kiss in a lot of ways. He brought the Stones to the table in a sense.
The Fonz.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about when I say the Stones, I mean the Rolling Stones kind of swagger, like honky tonk woman.
Right.
Paul brought that kind of to the band. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That kind of chukka and that whole swagger really was Paul's, and Paul had to carry that as the front man. So yeah, he brings so much stuff from his singing and his lyrics as well. I mean, for as much a powerhouse as Gene is, there you had with Deuce, you had Paul with Strutter. So and one thing I really miss about those days is when they would work together. And it seemed like the songwriting team didn't last that long, but I remember being a child, or a 13-year-old kid or whatever, reading, and I remember my mom and I sitting down and well, look, here's where they wrote on this song together, because I was like a huge Beatles fan, and to me it was so cool. Is Simmons and Stanley the next Lennon and McCartney? As
Right.
weird as that sounds, but
Sure.
it's 1975, 76, folks. One could have hoped that it would have worked out that way, but yeah. So you can't take anything away from any of the guys, but I think that it's going to come back down to it that it was Gene that the press always seemed to focus on. And let's be honest, Ace didn't really do that many interviews, and Pete didn't do all that many interviews back then.
Right.
And I'm just been reading Paul's book, and he talks about how he actually was kind of angry when they were being interviewed, because it was all happening so fast that, yes, they were training to get this look, they were training to get these moves, they were training to get these special effects, but they had never really taken into account that we're going to have to talk to people. I mean, if you look at the first Kiss interview, which is basically Gene on national television on the Mike Douglas show,
Yeah.
It comes off as very awkward and very amateurish and not what they wanted really to sell. It was kind of like, oh crap, we have to talk. Now what do we do?
Yeah, I know, the whole look at all these necks and cheeks.
I love that line. Look at all these necks and cheeks.
So bizarre.
But yeah, and then Paul was saying that when they replaced Michael Quattro on those Canadian dates, they were being interviewed by radio stations, and they had discussed that they weren't going to be filmed without their makeup, Paul was like, well, that sounded good until we have to like go put makeup on for like a 10-minute appearance at a radio station, and then what do we say? We're all four in a recording studio with a DJ, and he's asking us questions. Who's the lead man? What's our story? If you put that much into your character and that much into development of Kiss as a concept, you know, you kind of have to almost continue the fantasy, don't you?
You do.
And that's really one place where Kiss kind of fell down. And it was weird because to me, you watch them on the Paul Lynde show, and there's the hockey score. You know?
Go! Throw my hat down into the ring.
And now the laundry is done. Sorry, folks. Anyway,
they don't care.
Yeah, they don't care. But real life radio, folks.
That's right.
Later, you can join me while I fold, as we talk. And now the rinse cycle with jeans. But
you think Gene has ever folded any laundry?
Of course.
I wouldn't say in the last 30 years.
Oh, no, I believe that he does. I believe Gene's like, I could either pay someone to do this or I'll do it myself.
And there's why Ken Mills is the man, the Podfather, because he thinks like Gene Simmons, everybody.
Well, you know, I'm going to do this thing, and I'll kind of ruin it now, but, you know, I can just imagine Gene saying, like, everybody's going green. I've been green all my life. That's all I want. Send me your money at, you know. And so, you know, Gene's been going green for a long time, folks.
True.
So
it's true.
there you go. Another trend-setting thing from the world of Kiss.
Now,
but,
okay, keep going.
Well, getting back to our concept, who's the most valuable person, or the MVP or VIP, whatever you want to call it?
In Ace, you know, I remember an interview with Steven Adler from Guns N' Roses where he talked about meeting Slash, and at school he brought him home. He put on his Kiss albums, and he didn't say, I did all my Gene Simmons imitations. He didn't say Peter. He's a drummer. He didn't say Peter. He didn't say Paul. He said, I put on my record and I did all my Ace Frehley poses.
Wow.
So that, you know, to me, Ace was he was cool, you know, in his own way. He was, you know, he had his own swagger.
Well, that's the thing. Kiss was what you wanted it to be. And if you wanted to rock like this or rock like that, and they all had their dynamic poses. Like if they were action figures, you could say, and now the Kiss figures in action dynamic poses, you know, it's like that. And did you ever notice that there were like the different voices of Kiss commercials back in the like the early ones were like, and now Kiss on Casablanca.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yes.
And then later you've got this on Casablanca Records and Tapes.
You know, so it was weird how the progression, everything with Kiss, it started out kind of smarmy and sneaky and creepy. Then it got like
explosive
to the point where, like, on their last commercial for the Kisteria box set, you're just listening to it, and I think the Deuce or something is playing, and then thunderous explosions like every 5 seconds for no real apparent reason. It's like, wait, nothing's happening on screen. It's a little bit more to marketing than that, but then again, I don't run the Kiss Corporation.
Nope, and they made $1 billion.
Right, so maybe I'm just off on my talk, but it happened.
Now Ace's solo album, though, kind of saved the solo albums, wouldn't you say?
Wow, did it save the solo albums?
You know, when people talk about the solo albums, they talk about Ace.
Yeah. But that's because it had New York Groove. I think that Ace's solo album was a revelation, in the sense that everybody kind of thought, well, he's not going to really show up. It's, you know, it's all going to be just guitar stuff, and boom, here he was. He really brought it, and he he was saving stuff. He admits it in his book that he was saving material, and he was ready.
He was ready for that. Yes.
A lot of BJ Cramp, who has done some stuff with the podcast and does the Cheap Talk show with me, the Cheap Trick podcast. He'll say that everybody talks about how lazy Ace was, and I think that Ace chose what to be lazy about, what not to be lazy about, because it's time to carry equipment into and out of the venue. And he's like, "Hey, Carly, here's my penis when it's not erect or whatever," and Paul would just like go, "Whatever, I'm just going to keep carrying this amp,"
Right.
So
Paul Stanley's book is eye-opening.
Yeah, it really is. But so Ace chose what to be lazy about. He would say, "I'm not carrying that amp. I don't care about this song. It does nothing for me." Meanwhile, how can you say the guy's lazy when in a very short amount of time he goes from recording, Love Gun to making that great solo album of his?
Right.
He had just as much time as everybody else, so you can't say that he was lazy. It seemed like he could turn it on when he needed to. I think that at some point he just got really uninspired by the concept of A, carrying amps, and then B, keeping the Kiss machine going on. I think for whatever good or bad was going on, I believe that Ace was kind of almost sabotaging the band in the sense that he just wasn't into it. And I think that there's something about Ace's personality. If he's forced to do something he doesn't want to, he gets really destructive.
Well, one of the things that I always noticed was that after the solo albums, the next few records, or at least the next couple, Ace had more songs on than usual.
Right. Well, I think that, Kiss wanted to be the Beatles in that respect. They wanted to be the hard rock or heavy metal version of the Beatles. And when Ace came to them, with Cold Gin, they thought you could sing it, but he didn't. He just wasn't there. By the time Shock Me rolled around, he thought he could do it. And, to Gene and Paul's credit, they didn't say, "Hey, that's a damn fine song. I'll be singing that."
Right.
They said, "You should do it." But the value to Kiss was in that, collect them all. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That, that was one of the beauty. I mean, let's take a look at Twisted Sister. I don't care how much anyone loves or likes or dislikes Twisted Sister. When it comes down to it, if there's a Twisted Sister action figure, you really only need the Dee Snider doll.
That's all you need, yeah.
Nobody's saying, "Ooh, I need to collect the Eddie Ojeda or whatever."
J.J. French.
Yeah, I need the J.J. French one to complete my collection. Nobody cares.
You can put him in Kiss.
Anyway, I wouldn't put him with the Barbie doll. So anyhow, but to me, it was of great value for them to see Ace come to the forefront, not just as a guitarist, but as a vocalist and a songwriter, because it only made Kiss stronger. So that was kind of like an extension. Once Pete was gone, Ace stepped up, and it didn't hurt Paul and Gene to have another person to make Kiss stronger, if you will.
Sure. Now,
right? They needed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm gonna throw one little thing in, because I saw this picture and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. And what it is it's the original band, but Vinny in Ace's makeup and Eric in Peter's makeup. Now, if the band would have started off that way, do you think it would have? I mean, could we have? I don't think that we could have done it without Ace. Peter, when I look at his contributions, although I love Peter, if somebody else would have been in that spot, would we have got the same band? If Eric Carr,
that's one thing. We certainly wouldn't have gotten Beth.
Right. Sure.
So that's one thing you have to take out of it. But go on, you were saying if Eric Carr.
So if Eric Carr would have joined the band from the very beginning, he would have been in there, and there would have been no Peter Criss, but there would have been a Catman, and it would have been Eric Carr. Sometimes you got to wonder, that's where I weigh it out. Peter Criss was replaced, and the band went on. It didn't thrive like it did when Peter was in the band, but that's why I started talking about how important was he that they were able to go, oh, we'll replace you and keep going. You can't. I don't feel like you could do that with Gene at the beginning. You know.
Well, let me put it this way: at the point that Peter was stepping out, if Gene Simmons would have left and started his own career, it would have been pretty much the same. Right. Meaning that Gene would have tried, and he probably would have failed, and just like Pete did. And I just think that would have been for any of them. So it's not so much how easily was Pete replaceable, but I think that anybody at this point was replaceable in Kiss. At that point, Kiss was not the hottest band in the world. You know what I'm saying? They were the most. We just don't care about that band in the world, if that makes sense. So. For what it's worth.
All right. Well, I think this was a pretty good talk. What do you think?
Well, I think that in summation, I think it really does come down to the public sees Gene as the tongue/face of Kiss. But as far as what's important to the band Kiss, it was those four guys at that time.
Right. I think that Gene. When it comes down to it, it was all of them.
Right.
It was all of them. You needed one for the other, and the other for the other, and the other for the other, in order for it to work.
Right. But again, Gene was that gateway drug.
Absolutely. So as far as importance goes, although I kind of look at Paul as the leader, Gene probably, as far as the fame goes, he was the lead for that.
Yeah. And, Kiss, in a sense, had four leaders. And here's a whole nother show. You want to talk about good/bad ideas? When Bill O'Coin said, we're going to take these four guys and we're going to give them each 25% of this so that everybody will work just as hard. And how that can backfire. That'll be next episode right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. Well, thank you very much, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you being on the show. What's up? What's coming up with your show?
Well, the PODKISST is doing a look at revenge this month. So we have side 1 and side 2. We blab so much about it that we've had to cut it into 2 separate broadcasts. We're also doing that with Cheap Trick with their on the Cheap Talk show. Their classic album Heaven Tonight is finally being done by the staff, and we are starting a Monkeys cast called Zilch. So it should be up about the time this show airs. So there you go.
Let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
Do you have something Beatles coming up with Cassius Morris?
Actually, that's up right now. If you want to hear me pontificate, or as my wife says, run my mouth about the Beatles Revolver album, you can do that right now. So
awesome. I will make sure that I post the link.
Yep. Okay. Very good. Very good. And I'm doing a show, a radio show, where Mickey Dolenz is going to be on it, and I was referred to in the guest lineup as rock historian / podcaster. So there's no. So I'm now a rock historian.
Rock historian. That is amazing.
So that's going to cost you an extra $5 every time you come on this show now.
Mickey Dolenz is amazing.
Yes, he is.
He always cracked me up on the show.
And by the way, if you're listening on YouTube or however you're doing this, let us know what your top 5 favorite bands outside of Kiss are. Because I found that it seems like these are the 5 bands that Kiss fans seem to have in common in some way. Kiss, Cheap Trick, the Beatles, Alice Cooper, and the Monkees. And that's what I found. I want to know if I'm off the mark. And plus, Joe and I would just like to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. And it's really weird because I wasn't raised those bands were really great to me, but I was in a completely different genre of music because of being raised by a mom and not a mom and a dad. I'll put that under the thing. I'll put my 5 bands and see if anybody else does. But
what are they, real quick?
Well, it's going. The Beatles are in there, but then there is absolutely Barry Manilow.
Okay.
Elvis.
That feeling again, aren't you?
Yes. Elvis. Billy Joel. And Rex Smith.
Ah, well, there you go.
Hey, there's people sitting at home going, "Who the hell is Rex Smith?"
He actually was a pretty big pop star in the 70s, and he also recorded a song that sounded an awful lot like Little Caesar. So you'll have to play that for them.
I will do that. Well, thank you very much for being on. I appreciate you making time out of your very busy day of laundry.
I'm actually working too, but anyhow.
I'm sure that's the joke.
Yeah, but always a joy to be on Podcast Rock City, and anytime you need me, I'm here. If I can make it, I'm here, and glad to have you as part of our, I'm going to call it the PODKISST family, the PODKISST network, because even though we're not an official quote-unquote network, it all stems from that first stupid, silly podcast that we put up, and everybody's kind of following our parade. So
absolutely, there would be no Podcast Rock City without the PODKISST.
Well, and that's not said with arrogance. It's just I'm glad that everybody's going the same direction, and we all love one another. As a matter of fact, I got an email today from somebody. And if you don't mind, I can read.
No, go right ahead.
Okay, if it'll come up for me, that is. Let's see. Here we go. This is from Jack Broad. He wrote, "Hey guys, I just want to let you know how much I dig the podcast. I've been going through a pretty dark time over the last few months, and I recently found all the various KISS podcasts on iTunes and YouTube. PODKISST stands out among all the others as being the best of the bunch. You guys are definitely fun and entertaining to listen to, and it gets my mind off of all of the other craziness and uncertainty in my life at the moment. One of the things that I'm really digging is when the hosts of various podcasts do guest appearances on each other's podcast. The reason that I listen to most of these podcasts is that I like the viewpoints and the overall vibe of the host, and when you get the host of 2 great podcasts together, it's very entertaining to listen to. Keep doing what you're doing, Jack."
Awesome, Jack.
And he also says, "P.S. I also love the KISS Room. Fantastic."
Spectacular. Yeah, I was listening to the KISS Room last week. You were on.
I was.
And Matt was talking about me, and he was talking about Jody. And it was, and he even brought that up. He was like, you would think that there would be some kind of competition, but there's not at all. We all love each other and hang and talk and, exchange ideas. And that to me is one of the best things about, the fact that I'm doing this show is the fact that, I don't feel like I'm just sitting on the sidelines. I'm in it, and I'm talking to people and talking to you, talking to, any of them. Jody is great fun. Matt is awesome. I talked to Matt about wrestling as well as KISS. And you
want to talk about KISS and wrestling, we can't not, mention the guys at KISS
Science Theater, yes. Des will send, little messages every once in a while. I actually, when I went to WrestleMania, I bought Matt a WrestleMania 30 program and a cup, and I mailed it to him, and he seemed to be really blown away that I would do that. And I asked Des if he wanted one, and he was like, "No, save your money, I'm cool." And but yeah, so you can see, and like I said, I'm willing to help anybody because they're willing to help me, and that makes it way more fun.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for including me in this discussion. I hope that the folks found it interesting. Again, let us know your top 5 musical acts that you like, and we just hope to keep doing this, right, Joe?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ken.
All right. God bless. We'll see you.
You too. Well, there you have it, folks. Ken Mills, the Podfather, we like to call him, from the PODKISST. Go listen to, they have a 2-part show right now on Revenge, and it's great. I listen to it when I'm exercising, and those of you that see me, you would never imagine that I exercise, but I love to take my walks. Anyway, I'm going to be in a very large KISS cover band with Matt Porter. It's going to be awesome. Okay, so a few things before we go. Make sure if you're going to be in the South for the KISS concert in Atlanta, you enter the contest. I'm going to be bringing a couple people with me to the show, and we're going to do a podcast. You can enter at podcastrockcity1, the number 1, at gmail.com. Also, please go on iTunes and leave me a review. Those, you've been doing it. I've gotten a few more. The better off I am. Show's doing really well, and that's because of you guys, and I thank you very, very much. Next show. I don't have a topic yet, so if you have something, send me a message at that podcastrockcity1 at gmail.com, and I guess I'll do it. I don't have anything right now. I'm trying to come up. There was tons of KISS stuff happening. Now, now there's not. There's a tour happening. The Hall of Fame really gave us a lot to talk about, but that's over now. So, until next time, peace.
Greetings from Genville, KISS Army. Strange Ways Podcast wants to invite you to a rock and roll party. Join Jody Hannott, D-Rock, and Clinton Harris for the strangest KISS podcast known to our scientists at this time.
Really missed him.
Your KISS Army bros celebrate and discuss the gods of thunder. KISS! You can find the Earth versions on Podomatic, Facebook, iTunes, Stitcher, and blah, blah, blah. Just Google it. Thank you, and keep on rocking.
They are serious.
You wanted the best, you got the best. And if you want the hottest show on Monco Radio, join us in the KISS Room. The KISS Room is a monthly radio broadcast celebrating the hottest band in the world. It's your place for all things KISS and some. For broadcast dates and all information, go to thekissroom.com. The KISS Room broadcasts live and worldwide on Monco Radio, where music and minds meet.
This is a really big moment.
Hi, I'm Cassius Morris, host of KISS podcast Creatures of the Net. Our show content includes current events of the hottest band in the land, exclusive interviews, and the trials and tribulations of being a KISS fan. You can check out our show at www.creaturesofthenet.com and on Facebook or Twitter. And if you don't know the website name by now,
well, you better learn it.
We'll see you here.
History Science Theater, the most civilized.
Yeah.
Come on.
Respectful.
Just imagine Gene with like a washed up bass.
And serious.
No, wait. Excuse me, Bob. You're going to come over and do my album.
KISS podcast on the web. History Science Theater. We bust balls because we can.
Doctors define modern rock disorder as a sudden, intense drop in musical taste, affecting all facets of the victims' lives and the lives of those around them. Over 20 million Americans suffer. Do you? Is your newfound love of Axe body spray, leather wristbands, and mountains of hair care products driving those close to you crazy? Has your overwhelming desire to crank Nickelback, drink a sixer of Natty Ice, and yell at girls from the back of a pickup truck seriously impaired your work or social life? The Decibel Geek Podcast offers new hope. The Decibel Geek Podcast, the only podcast proven effective for MRD. The Decibel Geek Podcast corrects the chemical imbalance created by listening to bands like Theory of a Dead Man and Three Doors Down, so that with time and your hosts Criss and Aaron's help, you can move toward recovery. MRD hurts. The Decibel Geek Podcast can help. Visit www.decibelgeek.com to begin the road to recovery.
It's time for some cheap talk. You're listening to Trick Chat.
Their mommy's all right, their daddies are all right, they just seem a little weird. They even got their Kiss records out. This is Ken from the PODKISST. Join me, Matt, Andrew, and BJ as we talk about 4 great guys and 3 great chords. Cheap Trick. If you're a Kiss fan, chances are you checked them out. So please check out our show, Cheap Talk with Trick Chat, available for now in the PODKISST feed.
Keep cheap trickin'.
Someone, somewhere, is needing to hear from you. Someone needing to know that you care. Care enough to give the gift of PODKISST. Tell a friend about PODKISST today. Download us on iTunes, friend us on Facebook, and rock your ass out. PODKISST.
That's a picture of Joseph Kiss Sr., who came up with the vision of Kiss in 1753. Right, that Joseph Kiss.
That's, of course, a picture of him without makeup.
That's right, Mr. Joseph Kiss Sr.
All right.